Hi guys, welcome to the third test preview between India and England. Joining me is Nakul as usual. First things first, how have you managed this break, Nakul? What have you been up to in those 10 days between the second test and third test?
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly we can get used to just getting back on the treadmill, isn't it? In terms of a game every day and a week-long break between test matches seems like too much. I've been doing a bunch of review content of the second test, preview content of the third test, some stuff around cricketing issues of the day, finding ways to keep plenty busy. There's sport never sleeps.
That's true. Australian Open was on. I think I watched that. What Djokovic destroyed Medvedev in the final. Watched a bit of the IPL auction, which happened after the second test, which we did a review on ourselves, which was fun. But let's get to the third test. 100,000 plus capacity. Obviously, there won't be that many in the stadium, but there's expected capacity of 50,000. So they're expecting to fill in the stadium at least by 50%. What do you think? Do you think that will make a big difference to the players? The fact that there will be a big crowd in?
It's hard to see it not doing. I mean, it would imagine it would energize people. 55,000 in. All of the players on both sides have been very impressed by the stadium from what we've seen on social media. As you say, 110,000 capacity when full, the largest cricket stadium in the world. Will be at half capacity for all of the games that are in Ahmedabad, so these last two test matches and the five T20s. Uh, I was speculating before the series started that given that, for those of your viewers who don't know, the stadium is in Narendra Modi's hometown of Ahmedabad. It's where he's had his political power base throughout his career, going right back to his to even before he entered frontline politics, before he became chief minister of Gujarat. And it was really his idea to not just extend the old stadium, but knock it down and start again and rebuild the stadium as the biggest in the world. And it was important to him that it was in his hometown and with quite a lot of his control. And Amit Shah, who was his home minister at the time, now home minister of the country, whose son, incidentally, is president of the BCCI. Oh, not president, secretary of the BCCI. The political dimensions of the ground should not be overlooked, and I think it would have been very embarrassing to him and to the current administration had the first Test match there not had any people in. So a combination of political will and a certain amount of luck with the COVID cases has meant that a half capacity is now feasible. But yeah, the Modi Dome looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and just just to come back on the pitch, obviously, like you said, the ground's been rebuilt. A lot of talk in the first two test matches was about the pitch and how it's played, if it was a good wicket or a bad wicket. Is it a blessing that nobody knows what the pitch is going to do in the third test match because it's the first time they're playing there? So nobody really knows what it's going to do. So there's no point talking about it, is there?
Oh, people have tried, but I do think it's a blessing that not only is it a completely brand new stadium, you can't even really go off the old one because the last time the old one hosted the test match was 8 years ago or more. So yeah, we don't know. We're seeing little bits of pieces on social media, but you can't tell anything from a ground 3 days out. Really, what it's going to do. You know, some talk they'll probably try and keep a bit of grass on it to try and protect the pink ball, which because of the dyeing process that they use for pink balls does tend to go a little bit softer, quicker than the red ball, the red SG ball, particularly, which is meant for harder Indian pitches. Whether how much it'll assist the spinners, how much it'll assist the fast bowlers, how much bounce there'll be, we just don't know any of that. The ball or the pitch. So and how much effect the lights will have, what effect the dew will have, if any. We know it's got a really good drainage system, so if there is any dew, that might not be so much of an issue. But as you say, it's a giant unknown. It's quite exciting in many ways. You don't often get these situations where the state of the pitch is a complete unknown going into it. So yeah, it's exciting and also it's refreshing in a way that we don't have to, at least until the test match starts, spend too much time talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly, you mentioned the pink ball as well and the dyeing process of it. I don't know how many people listening will remember when in one day cricket they used to use one ball and it used to switch after 34 overs because the ball used to lose its color. And similarly with the pink ball, it'll be interesting to see if it how many overs that ball lasts, because it's only the second time the day-night test is being played in India. So the SG ball obviously is the second time it'll be used in international test match in India. What do you think? How much of a difference will the light factor be and the ball in both teams' approach to the test match as compared to an ordinary day test match?
I mean, one would expect that you'll have fewer spinners playing. India probably going in with two, and England going in with one. One would imagine would be the case. So in terms of the makeup of the attack, it is different. But that would be, they'd be looking to have a look at the pitch in any circumstance. As in terms of how much how they wanted to weight their attack. I don't really know how much you can go off the last day-night test. It was in Calcutta, completely the other side of the country. Completely different weather, different time of year. The test only lasted 2 and a bit days. It is true that only one of the wickets that India took fell to spin, as opposed to falling to pace. But again, I don't know how much you can really read into that. So it's a bit of an unknown, and there has been a sort of general trend across the day-night tests all over the world that the first session, with the newer ball has been a bit harder to bat than the afternoon session when the ball's a bit flatter and it's still daytime. It's a little bit easier. Then once the lights come on, it gets a bit harder. But those are very general and should be taken with a huge pinch of salt, because there's a lot of variation depending on where you are in the world and all of these things. So teams are going to both teams are going to have to go with their best summation of conditions and their best idea of how they're going to take 20 wickets on that surface as they see it, and obviously taking into account the availability and fitness of the bowlers. But the 10-day break, I suppose, does mean that all of the bowlers should really be fit on both sides. Just seen today, Umesh Yadav has been officially passed fit by India. Jofra Archer appears to be fit and raring to go for England. So really, apart from the fact Sam Curran's not able to be with the England team because of the logistics of getting him out there for the third test match, and Mohammad Shami's still not properly fit, and Bhuvneshwar Kumar as well. In terms of both teams have pretty much their first choice full attacks to pick from, which is pretty exciting.
That brings me to my next question. I was going to ask you is that we've had a long break between the two test matches. Which team has benefited more from the break, in your opinion? Is it England or India?
I mean, it's probably England, just on the fact that they lost the last one so heavily. But I think both teams would need it, to be honest, and both teams would want it to get their fast bowlers into a good state and and to just brush off the cobwebs. I mean, no team really should ever be asked to play 3 test matches in a row back to back. It's too much. So maybe just about England, but I think both teams will benefit from the break. And more to the point, you knew that this was the schedule going into it, so you prepare accordingly. It's not as though this was a surprise to either team.
Yeah, and with the bowling lineup, I wanted to ask you, because of this break, are we going to see England unleash Archer, Anderson, Broad, that trio in this test match? What do you think? Do you think that will happen?
I think so. That would certainly be the way that I would go, and I would expect that that's the way England want to go. The only possible reason that you wouldn't is that with Jack Leach, that's quite a long tail. But I think England have to be brave here. Them winning the series is a bonus. Not a bonus, but it would be unexpected, and they have a chance of doing something. As much as I expect India to win this series, probably 3-1, England do have a chance now. They've given themselves a chance with their superb performance in the first test match, and I think they should be bold and go with the attack that they think is best suited to taking 20 wickets, and I think that is Archer, Broad, Anderson, Leach, Stokes, with maybe a few overs of fill-in from Joe Root.
Yeah, and I was going to
the only change you might make to that is maybe you have Chris Wokes, who is a very decent bowler, and maybe brought into the game more by the pink ball. I don't know who you leave out for him. I think it would be Archer, Broad, and Wokes might be a little bit samey. Anderson, Broad, and Wokes might be a little bit samey. I don't see that they'll leave out Stuart Broad. I don't think that's a good idea, frankly. He would seem to be one of England's best 3 bowlers in these conditions, and I think all things being equal, Archer, Broad, and Anderson are England's best three seamers. So that would be the way I would go.
And you mentioned as well, if they go with those three as well as Leach, that tail end, the batting seems a bit thin, but they need to back themselves. Do you think they'll miss Moeen Ali a lot with that fact? And Moeen Ali would have. Do you think Moeen Ali would have played ahead of Leach just so they could fit in those three fast bowlers together?
I'm not sure. I think Leach has significantly outbowled Moeen Ali. Moeen took a lot of wickets in the Test match, and batted well in the second innings, albeit under little pressure. But he did look fluent, and it seems to be coming off the bat nicely.
Mm-hmm.
I think Leach has bowled very well. If you were going purely on the bowling, I think then Leach might well have probably would have played ahead of Moeen Ali anyway. They don't have that option. They stuck with their plan quite rightly of sending him home and giving him a break.
Yeah,
even if it did get communicated in a slightly unfortunate way.
I don't want to get into that. I think there's been a lot of spotlight on that, and I've read your piece on it as well, so you covered it very well. Just on the flip side with India, you already mentioned that India most likely to go in with two spinners, probably with Akshar Patel and Ashwin again. But Bumrah, the one expected change is obviously Bumrah coming in. The question is, I was going to ask you, does he come in for Siraj as a straight swap, or do India go in as well with three pacers? Is that a possibility? We can see three pacers play with Umesh Yadav fit and Siraj bowling well, the amount he got to bowl in the last test. Come in for maybe an Akshar Patel and go in with a four-pronged attack of Ashwin, Bumrah, Ishant Sharma, and a third pacer, either Siraj or Umesh. Is that a possibility?
I'm expecting three seamers and two spinners.
Oh.
So I'm expecting it to be very similar to so it'll be Jasprit Bumrah for Kuldeep Yadav, and then you have a choice between Umesh Yadav and Mohammad Siraj.
Interesting.
I would suspect, given that Umesh is now fit again, given how well he did in the last pink ball test, and given his phenomenal record in India over the last few years. Again, his last 10 test matches, he's taking his wickets in India at 18 with a strike rate of 25. That's exceptional. So I would imagine that India, assuming that Shubman Gill is fit, I would imagine that the India lineup will be Gill and Rohit, Pujara, Kohli, Rahane, Pant, Ashwin, Akshar, and then Ishant, Bumrah, and Umesh Yadav. Probably not in that batting order. Maybe Umesh bats above Bumrah, but anyway, I would expect that would be the 11. So you're going with the five bowlers, relying on the fact that Ashwin and Akshar can do a good job at 7 and 8.
And of course, in the last test, we saw a glimpse of the Rahane of old. We saw Ashwin get back into form. Akshar Patel batted well whenever he got the chance. Is that a good sign going into the test match that India is a very confident 11? Anyone who plays doing well, even Washington Sundar, when he got his chance in the first test, he scored runs. He didn't bowl too well, but he got runs with the bat. So there is a lot of confidence brewing in the Indian side. Does that tip it in favor of the Indian side a little more than the English side, do you think?
I would think that India are favourites. I mean, the pink ball test was earmarked before the series started as England's best chance of winning a test match, and you can understand why, given that it is likely to bring the seamers more into contention. But India's seam bowlers have massively outbowled visiting seamers in the last few years. Taking their wickets in the low 20s compared to in the high 40s compared to India's seamers versus opposition seamers over the last 4 years or so in India. And I keep saying this: India's seamers in that last 4 years since the start of 2017 have a better average in economy rate in India than the spinners do.
Yeah.
So I think you're going with both sides, but having very strong attacks for the conditions. And I think that in conditions that aren't particularly weighted towards one type of bowling or another, I think India have the stronger team and are the stronger team in India in most cases. I would think that is that has been borne out by the record over the last several years. And yeah, of course, the fact that a lot of players are fit, a lot of players are not fit. Sorry, a lot of players are in form. A lot of players have made contributions during this series to some degree. I think pretty much every player, apart from maybe Kuldeep, who did okay, and Shabazz Nadeem, every other player who's played has made some sort of contribution. I suppose the one wildcard selection we hadn't mentioned is it was certainly noted that at the end of that second test match that Hardik Pandya was bowling in the middle with a pink ball. How fit he is to bowl, I don't know, and I haven't seen anything regarding that. Maybe India are playing their cards close to their chest. They might consider playing him instead of Akshar, but I think it would be a bit of a risk given that we don't know how fit he is to bowl, and there's a white ball series coming up. It's not impossible that he could play, but I would think it's unlikely.
If he does play, then who do India go in with them? Three pacers, Ashwin and Hardik Pandya, or do they go with two pacers, Ashwin and Kuldeep and Hardik Pandya?
I would imagine that they would go in, if they wanted to play Hardik, it would be for Akshar. So you'd go in with the three fast bowlers, Hardik and Ashwin. Similar, I guess, to what you were doing in the away test series. Except, it might be Jadeja here, there. If they go in with Hardik, two fast bowlers and two spinners, I would imagine that the two spinners will be Ashwin and Akshar, to be honest, rather than Kuldeep, who I feel a bit sorry for, and I do feel sorry that he's been left out of the T20 squad. I'm not quite sure what the logic is behind that, but I would think that Hardik playing is not impossible, but an outside chance and a bit of a risk, and I'm not sure a risk that is necessarily worth taking, given that given that Akshar Patel has performed quite well and that we know he is fit to bowl some overs. I mean, plus the hometown familiarity, although again it's a completely new. It's the first time it's hosting an international. It's the first time with a pink ball, so I don't know how much. I don't know how much that really can tell you. Akshar's never played in this stadium either.
Yeah, and another thing you mentioned earlier, I wanted to speak about was the fact that Shubman Gill is maybe going to miss this test match. If he does, then do you go in with Mayank Agarwal as a straight swap for an opener? Or do you switch it around? Like you said, Hardik Pandya has been practicing. Does he come in for Shubman Gill just so you could have that extra bowling option, and then Pujara opens the innings and Rahane comes in at 3 and Pandya slots in at 5? Or is that too much change?
That's unnecessary chopping and changing. I don't think anybody's considering that, really. If from what we understand, Shubman Gill is fit. As far as we know, Shubman Gill is fit. If it wasn't, and let's say he woke up on the morning of the game or the day before with some pain, Mayank Agarwal probably slots in. Maybe KL Rahul, probably Mayank Agarwal, given that he was more likely to be the next cab off the rank. But from what we know, Shubman Gill is fit and will play. And I wouldn't imagine that there'll be too many changes. As I said at the start, I would imagine that the changes will be Jasprit Bumrah for Kuldeep Yadav and Umesh Yadav for Mohammad Siraj.
And last thing I wanted to ask you about this test match. If those changes that you mentioned happen and England go in with Broad, Archer, Anderson, and Jack Leach with Ben Stokes as the fifth bowler and Root maybe rolling his arm over, then how much of a chance do England have to win this test match in your opinion?
A bowling attack that good gives you a chance for sure. But then again, India also have a very good bowling attack and have a world-class spinner, which England don't. Jack Leach is a good bowler and a rapidly improving bowler, but he's not Ashwin.
Yeah.
There's just no, and he would be the first to admit that. And England's batters would not be looking forward to facing Bumrah, Ishant, and Umesh. India's batters would, of course, not be looking forward to facing Broad, Anderson, and Archer. But I don't think that. I think it would set up. I would think it would set the game up for a really interesting test match with two quality bowling attacks going at each other. And I think India have shown that that when the pitches are relatively neutral or slightly weighted towards the seam bowling, they've got the fast bowling attack to beat teams consistently at home, and they've been doing it for several years now. Certainly for the last 4 years, and even for a little bit beforehand. It's never going to be like England where the ball is moving all the time laterally and in that way. It will make for potentially a really difficult test match for the batters, particularly given that it's likely to be a relatively dry conditions. Ahmedabad is not a particularly humid place, and the pitch might take some turn at some point later in the test match. So it could well be a really fascinating test match, but I think that all things being equal, India are the stronger team and have the more experienced batters pretty much throughout. Have certainly the edge in terms of the spin bowling options, and have an attack that it's difficult to say on a par with, given that Anderson and Broad have 1,100 plus wickets between them. You can't really make that comparison, but a very good bowling attack that is capable of troubling any batting lineup in the world. So I think we're going to be in for a superb Test match. I really do.
Yeah, and one person I wanted to talk about playing his 100th Test match this game is Ishant Sharma. Only the second Indian pacer to cross that mark. Has over 300 Test wickets now. Started in 2007 against Bangladesh. Had that brilliant series against Australia down under, where he troubled Ricky Ponting. But then he seemed to have that phase where his career seemed to be going downhill, wasn't taking any wickets, especially in India where he just wasn't getting it. And then something happened after 2015-16 and he just hasn't looked back. He's leading the Indian pace attack. Jasprit Bumrah, Umesh Yadav, Bhuvneshwar Kumar, and all the Indian pacers coming through consistently credit Ishant Sharma as the mentor who's guiding them, taking them through the test match, telling them how to bowl, and basically making them better bowlers. What's his legacy in your mind, the guy playing his 100th test match so far? Is he going to end his career as a legend of Indian cricket?
I think he should do. And certainly if you take the latter part of his career, he's I don't know about up there with any bowler in the world, because we're talking about Cummins and Rabada and Bumrah and Anderson and Broad. I mean, this is pretty, and any number of New Zealand fast bowlers as well. This is we're in a very good period of, as I've talked about before, for fast bowling right now. But his longevity has been incredible, and the way he's been able to improve over the course of his career has been remarkable. And he has, what has happened partly is that he's had an attack around him, and he hasn't had to take the burden on by himself. The pitches have got a lot less dead than they were, and a lot less generally weighted heavily towards spin bowlers. He has made some improvements over time to his action, to his run up, to his positioning at the crease. I think perhaps the stint at Sussex is a little bit overplayed, because he was improving before that, but certainly working that much with Jason Gillespie and being asked to be the leader of the attack in that sense. Certainly, I think he's relished that, and he's relished being very clearly relished being a leader and taking on that senior bowler role over the course of the latter part of his career. And he's getting better and better. He's so consistent now. His run up is so consistent. He has that ability to move the ball into the right hander, away from the left hander. He's so dangerous around the wicket to left-handers. Gets that slightly awkward bounce from a length because of his height, which he uses really well, which he didn't always before. His wrist position is good, right behind the ball. His run-up is very smooth. And he has learnt his craft over time, and he's passing that on to these guys, as you say, Bumrah and Umesh and Bhuvneshwar Kumar and Mohammad Shami and these guys. And I'm sure as Siraj develops as a test fast bowler, that'll be the case. And you can say the same thing with Ashwin and too. It helps. You become a better bowler when the attack around you is better. Not everyone can be Murali and take the entire burden on themselves. That those days are mostly done. Most teams don't have those sort of highly imbalanced attacks, and it takes a rare bowler to be able to perform that at that level when it's just on you. It's an incredible stat that I worked out the other day in the course of writing another article, that Muttiah Muralidharan has been retired now for 10 years, and he's still taken 20% of all of Sri Lanka's test wickets. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable bowler. But
I don't think they'll really like him.
No.
Number of times he was called up for his action and still managed to take those wickets, which was rubbish, by the way, him being called up for his action. But to keep managing to reinvent yourself, even when the T20s came in right at the end of his career, he managed to play for Chennai Super Kings and did well for them as well.
Yeah, for sure. Potential all-time CSK 11 contender. And massive digression, but in 2004, he starts bowling the Dusra, gets called again, and has to basically prove to everyone that he's allowed to bowl. And he bowls, there's a Channel 4 documentary, it's an hour long, and he's bowling with a strap on his arm to keep his arm straight, and there's cameras everywhere, and he's talking through all of his variations in incredible detail, and Simon Hughes in the Channel 4 truck is picking them apart in detail. He's basically saying, this is how Murali bowls everything. After that point, so you could divide his career. his average before that point, his average after that point. His test average goes down slightly. It's unbelievable. The greatest test bowler of all time for my mind. But anyway, the Murali Lovin aside, Ishant Sharma has been a fine servant to Indian cricket and is just getting better and better. And he's been a joy to watch over the last few years.
Yeah, and I hope his moment will be appreciated by the Ahmedabad crowd. I'm sure actually it will be. He's always been that underrated character in the Indian dressing room. We talk about superstars like Bumrah and we talk about Virat Kohli. Sometimes people forget Ishant Sharma and the contribution he's made. He's like that silent assassin. He's just there and he's just treading along, doing his thing. And he just silently reached 100 test matches. Another player who's close to a milestone is R. Ashwin, nearing 400 test wickets. Is this the test match he gets at Nakul?
I mean, what is he on R. Ashwin in terms of his number of wickets? He's pretty close. I mean, maybe this isn't the test match. Maybe because of because it's going to be spin bowler dominated. Yes, he's on 394. So yeah, he would have to bowl well, but not dramatically well. Certainly, he'll do it in this series, and it could well be this test match. It's good that he'll have a crowd in. It's on, maybe a shame he couldn't do it at home in Chennai, but you don't get to always pick your moment like that. And yeah, I mean, Ashwin appears to be bowling better than he ever has. I mean, what he was talking about at the end of the second test in terms of his having different load-ups for different deliveries, and I've heard him talk in 2018 about having like a different cock of the wrist for every different type of delivery, or not even every different type of delivery, but depending on whether he wants to overspin the ball or cut under the ball and bowl a little more side spin, or kind of almost bowl like a sort of flippery type thing, or bowl the front of the hand leg break. It's very rare to find a bowler who's so in control that they can not only know all of this stuff, but be able to consciously articulate it and then not overthink it. To have all of these variations, to be able to talk about them in such detail, and then to be able to know when to use them, to not overuse them, to not think, right, I have to do this now, or to overthink things and to get too confused about what you're trying to bowl. Ashwin is a freak in terms of his understanding of the art of bowling. He really is. And his conscious articulation of that understanding of the art of bowling. He's going to make a phenomenal coach or commentator when he's done. But he doesn't seem to be showing any signs of being done anytime soon. I think he's bowling as well as he ever has, which, given that he's 34 years old and has been playing international cricket for
2010 he started, so 11
years. Yeah, so it's a decade.
Yeah.
Or more. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And he's been fantastic to watch in this series. And it's great to see his batting coming back to somewhere close to where it was as well, which is again something he's done an awful lot of work on.
Yeah, interestingly, Virat Kohli, the BCCI put up a video of Virat Kohli interviewing Ashwin, and Ashwin said he used to overthink his batting quite a lot. And basically, Virat Kohli told him, you know what, you've got the ability, just stop thinking. And he said, I went into the Chennai test without thinking about my batting, not thinking if my technique's right or wrong, and I scored 100. So he was like, maybe it's time I don't overthink everything.
It's pretty hard. I mean, I think it must be difficult if you're Ashwin to switch off. I mean, you can see that from the sheer quantity and quality of his YouTube videos.
Yeah,
the guy is more prolific. The guy is more prolific than most broadcasters. But that's a shame. But yeah, overthinking and batting don't really mix. You have to be pretty reactive. And he's it's a genuine conversation now. It's a genuine conversation now based on the sort of all-rounderness of them, or not the all-rounderness, because I think Jadeja is the superior batter. Oh, yeah. But you can have this conversation now about if you only go with one spinner rather in overseas conditions and you need the batting, you can legitimately pick Ashwin as a 7, certainly as an 8, if not a 7.
The competition bodes really well for India. That competition between those two is healthy. They respect each other. They like each other. And I think that really bodes well for India, especially when they toe, because that will keep both of them on their toes. And India will definitely do better. Of course, this test has its own implications on the ICC Test Championship, which is due in July, the final. If England June, sorry. If England win, India basically out. In Australia will be watching with keen eyes. If India win, there's almost every chance India go through. All they have to do is draw the 4th test. So last thing, Nakul, who wins this test match and who is in that ICC Test Championship final in your eyes?
For all of the reasons I articulated earlier about how strong India's pace attack is, how well set up their batting has been to play seam bowling at home, even in slightly more helpful conditions for seam bowlers. The relative strength and experience of the two batting lineups, the Ashwin factor, India's all round quality, and just how difficult it is to win in India, and how well you have to play. England have to be at that level of the first test again, and that's really bloody difficult against a good team. It's so difficult to be able to. They produced nearly the perfect test match in that first game in China. That's so hard to replicate. So I think it's going to be a fantastic test match. England are going to have their moments for sure. It's a mouth-watering prospect, the idea of Umesh, Ishant and Bumrah up against Archer, Broad and Anderson. I mean, that's so exciting. For any cricket fan, I don't care who you support. If you support neither team involved in this, if you're just a broadcaster looking on, if you're a partisan of either side, that's properly exciting, and I can't wait for that to happen. Even more so, 55,000 under lights. It's going to be wonderful. But I think India are going to win a good test match, and I think that India will make the World Test Championship final alongside New Zealand.
Wow, that was a good conversation to have with you, Nakul. Thank you for joining me. And for all the Aussie fans, I am sorry for Nakul's prediction. We'll wait and find out who goes to that final. It'll be interesting. I will be watching with keen eyes. I'll be looking to see what that ping ball does and what the bowlers you just mentioned do with that ping ball. It'll be great to watch, and I will see you, Nakul, after the third test match when we'll hopefully be doing a review of what actually happens on the pitch. So until then, see ya.
Cheers, Viraj.